Skirk's been out for a while now, and since I've had the chance to test her out more extensively, I thought I'd deliver my more fleshed out thoughts on the character, and evaluate whether my pre-release pros and cons were accurate or not. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. I mentioned that Miss Whale Owner over here would be an absolutely busted Cryo DPS, and yes, that holds 100% true. She feels really strong. Even when she was somewhat underbuilt, I felt like she was mowing down foes like there was no tomorrow, really living up to the power that she's so desperately searching for. Just do her story quest, man, trust me, it's worth it. That aside, she's certainly living up to said conquest. She's deleting enemies in cold, abyssal blood. It's insane. Now, would I consider her to be the best Cryo DPS? Yes, but not to a point where she's a must-pull if you already have an invested DPS of the element. A strong Ayaka is still going to feel super powerful, provided that you have Escoffier. Gordon Ramsay over here is the real key to the puzzle. Escoffier might as well be the Cryo Divine Key, because that's how much power she adds to DPSs of the element. So while I 100% do agree with the sentiment that Skirk's a mean fighting machine, I will say that she's not going to make your other Cryos feel like trash, and you do want the Molding Chef in order to really feel her full potential in action. With that being said, playstyle-wise, I do think that she's got to be the smoothest of the current Cryo DPS roster. Most of them tend to have some sort of gameplay caveat that can really dampen the gameplay experience for most folks. Real Beastly wanting a C1, Ganyu's Charge Chop playstyle not being for everyone, Ayaka's Burst requiring an excellent degree of accuracy if you want all of the burst ticks to land. Let's not forget about the RNG seasoning on top, since if the enemy moves away from her burst, yeah, Skirk faces no such trials and tribulations. She's just a strong Cryo unit, no strings attached. Okay, not true, Escoffier attached, but you get the idea. I had also mentioned that this lady was going to be an absolute freeze legend. 100% yes. But to be honest, it's mostly because she has to play in freeze comps due to her mechanics. Essentially, if you want her to generate burst energy, she doesn't use standard ER mechanics. No, she uses Serpent's Subtlety, which you generate through consuming Void Rifts. You can only generate those through triggering Cryo-related reactions, and considering that she gains insane benefits for only playing in Cryo Hydra teams from her A4, you're just naturally going to end up playing her in freeze teams. Now I would like to add, she definitely makes up for freeze itself not being all that useful anymore. It's great when it works, but when it doesn't, not a big deal, since Escoffier is offering a ton of reg shred for the team comp that you're playing, and SKIRKARONI herself is benefiting from her A4. She uses the reactions as a means to juice herself up, so that she can take down all of those unfreezable enemies with ease. So for that reason, she's definitely one of the best modern ways to play freeze teams, since, well, it's more about the damage dealt than the non-existent crowd control. I will add, this isn't so much related to the point itself, but it's a fun team so I'm throwing it in here. Skirk Child dual carry, while not being particularly meta, is still a really fun time in my opinion, and it's been the main team where I've been using her. It's a cool way to use Master and Student together if you're looking to play those two in one team. Speaking of which, Hoyoverse littered a ton of cool little references to Child's kit within his Masters, which you'd only notice if you were a true Tartaglia enjoyer at one point in your life. Thanks Hoyoverse, appreciate that. She also doesn't feature any ER requirements, which I felt was a pro. There's no need to build any ER substats on her, because she generates all of her energy based on Serpent's Subtlety, and you consume Void Rifts in order to prolong her field time in her DPS state. I think this is nice, since it means you don't have to worry about ER requirements for this particular character, so that's one less thing you have to worry about when rolling your artifacts. I will add, I think the main thing that I really like about this is that she's a fantastic overworld character. Entering her skill and gliding across the map has been a lot of fun, and she covers a lot of ground. There's also the fact that she doesn't rely on traditional energy in order to beat down regular enemy encounters. I hate it when characters are stupidly overkill, and have to use their burst in order to access her damage output. Characters that have their DPS stored within their skill or normal attacks on demand are far more comfortable for the overworld in my experience. And let me tell you, this Abyss Lady has been absolutely perfect for my overworlding needs. I've been catching up on a lot of old exploration content that I've missed recently, and using Skirk to get around the place has been an absolute blast. It's also nice that she doesn't use Xilonen, since that means that you're able to save her for another team. It's genuinely always going to be more worth using only Cryos and Hydras in your team, even if your DJ Cat is constellated. You just get a ridiculous amount of value from Escoffier and Skirk's passives. I had recently talked about how insane Skirk synergies get too, with TDDS Intercity Muolani being an actually viable team. And yes, it literally is. It unironically serves as a pretty good Hydra option for her. It's not even that cope. I don't know what world we're living in anymore honestly, but hey, pretty cool I guess. Sit Lolly on TDDS and Cinder City works fine too, but keep in mind that she's not shredding Cryo Res. Hydra Res though? Your Lady Farina is gonna be eating good. She just generally has a pretty good selection of teammates. It does suck how badly you really want Escoffier, but outside of that one restriction, there's genuinely a multitude of good characters you can use with her. Lady Farina, Yolan, the Yeeted One, Shenhe, Dahlia, Mualani, Sitlolly, Mona, Xingqiu, and that's only for her on-fielder playstyle. Speaking of which, that's right, this young lady isn't even just a main DPS. Her conquest for power is never-ending. So much like how she does not limit herself to one world, she does not limit herself to one playstyle either. You can either choose to play her as a main DPS, as I've mostly been focusing on throughout this video, which is indeed very strong. However, you can also opt to play her as a burst DPS instead. This will result in you swapping her in from off-field occasionally to use that nuclear burst of hers. And before you grow concerned about this being a mighty fine waste of a Skirk, no, not at all. This is indeed a strong role for her to take in teams, and is a fantastic option if you already have an invested Cryo DPS, but you still want to find a use case for her. You can either slot her in within Cryo DPS teams or Hydro DPS teams. This is also another case in which this guy over here has gained another teammate, and I'm officially convinced that the entire Hoyoverse office are Novelette simps. That aside, it's a fun alternate way to use the character that's actually quite strong if you do level up her burst. Give it a shot, I do think it's cool. Flaws-wise, I did point out how desperately Skirk wants Escoffier. Sadly, yes, this is the case. She really wants her, man, and I mean really. I guess when you consider that this lady looks at insects in the abyss and decides that those are delicious, it's only natural that she'd be seeking out a chef for what real food tastes like. I mean, your disciple can literally cook and invited you over for sausages. You better commit to that at some point, Skirk. That aside, she does really want her. This isn't even so much because there's something in her kit that can only trigger if you own the molding chef. It's more so just because Escoffier unlocks the true potential of Cryo. This character was balanced around her, so the assumption is made that you own the chef. In fact, if you go into your trial, which usually would only ever consist of 4-star characters, the trial itself literally has Escoffier in there since it knows that there's just no alternative that wouldn't pose a massive low taper fade drop-off in damage. You can use Charlotte or Mika in her place, but you're then missing out on all of that insane red shred and personal damage. In good faith, I just have to be honest. Skirk isn't as worth it without the molding chef. Now yes, if you don't have her, then you can just stick her as a burst bot in Mr. Settle Down teams, and that's your problem solved. Because that dude is so strong that you'll wipe the floor with endgame content regardless of whether you have the molding chef or not. But if you're looking to actually utilize Skirk effectively, then she is super dependent on her. Here's hoping that an actually good 4-star alternative releases soon. I did always say in the past that one major way to fix Cryo would be to just give us an insanely overloaded support to bring the element up to modern standards. While this certainly worked, it did come at the caveat of all Cryo Vision holders feeling gimped without said unit as a result. Sadly, despite her endless conquest for power, even this unfortunate fate could not be escaped by Skirk. A fate scarier than even what Sir Loki promised her, man! A flaw that I mentioned was her wish to only play with Cryos and Hydros, but like I said earlier, I don't actually think this is too bad. It looks restrictive on paper, but the only true restriction is wanting the chef. Otherwise, you actually have quite a lot of good options at your disposal, and because she's able to choose between differing playstyles, you can easily slot her into a multitude of unique teams. However, this can be annoying for anybody who doesn't really have a good roster of Cryo or Hydro units, since then, you might end up having to play something relatively cope. But she's very strong, so as long as you're cooking with the chef, you'll be fine. I'd also brought up how Ayaka's existence retroactively harms Skirk's value as a character, because she's more than enough as a Cryo DPS. I do agree that if we're looking at things from an efficiency standpoint, a well-invested Ayaka that has an Escoffier by her side doesn't really need to be replaced right now. She's still a strong option, even though we have the Abyss Lady out now. You have to consider that we're very close to not cry. Hoyo is soon going to reveal an entirely new cast of characters, and it's highly likely that at least one of those is going to catch your eye. So if you're not a devoted Skirk simp, and you're looking at things more from the angle of someone who is unsure of whether they should pull or not, I'd evaluate whether you really need her right now or not. She'll eventually get a rerun. Hoyo doesn't gatekeep their big releases for that long, so she'll likely be back in about 4 to 5 months give or take after her banner ends, maybe 3. So while Skirk is an upgrade, true, it's not one that justifies entirely replacing your old Cryo DPS when we have an entirely new region dawning upon us soon. Keep that noted in your head. I talked about how we just have an insanely broad DPS selection at the minute, so Skirk would be adding another one to the pile, since the DPSing standard right now is so high. I do think that this doesn't hold as strongly, since she ended up being very powerful with the right teammates. But my point does still stand that if you have a DPS from Fontaine or Notlon, they're still likely wiping the floor of the Abyss even now. So as always, unless you're pulling Skirk for waifu reasons in particular, consider the usual questions that are asked when pulling for a new main DPS. Do you actually need a brand new DPS unit, and will they actually add anything to your account? And consider, does your account actually have the means to make Skirk powerful? With that being said, I'll just rip off the band-aid now. If you don't have Escoffier, then no, she's not worth getting. Plain and simple. And now it's time for the moment that you've all been waiting for. Where do I currently think that Skirk stands in the meta? I do think that she's the best Cryo DPS that we currently have access to, no doubt about that. Very impressive in my opinion. Although you do really want another limited 5-star in order for her to feel that level of potential, which is kind of a shame. So if you don't have said 5-star, I can't recommend her anywhere near as much. She's ultimately primo bait before not cry. Good primo bait, I love her a lot, and all the child references in her kit are awesome as somebody who adored that guy at a point in time. But even so, SKIRKARONI over here is not a must pull by any means. Amazing, but not a must. Would recommend if you're willing to invest around her, would skip if not. Her power level is high if you have all the goodies that she wants, but otherwise, a pretty easy pass. Regardless of anything, she's just cool as all heck, man. It's freaking Skirk, dude, need I say more? I've really been enjoying completing old content that I've fallen behind with using her. Easily one of the coolest characters that Genshin's ever made. She's entered my top 5 favorites after doing that banger of a story quest. I seriously recommend it if you haven't done it already. It's a certified banger! That aside, I think she's awesome. I just wish Hoyo made her less reliant on Escoffier. Her sets are flexible, and she has plenty of good weapon options, with Finale of the Deep being great on her, but she really wants that chef dude. It's a little unfortunate. How about yourself? Do you see her as mere primo bait, or are we a fan? Let me know down below. I have a fun second channel where I just kind of yap about whatever in relation to gacha games. Go check that out if that's something that you're interested in. Hopefully this video was able to share my opinions on Skirk now that we've had her out for a while. This has been Juice, signing out, and the real Cryo savior was the Escoffiers that we made along the way.